If you want to know where the attack trends are, follow the technology trends. Because as new technology, new things start to kind of crop up on the internet, you can be sure there's going to be additional attack vectors there.
You're listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, the place to learn about new technology and technological advances before they become mainstream. This podcast is sponsored by D-Link Technology. Make your home smarter, safer, and truly seamless. Let's get into it.
Welcome to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and our guest today is Anthony Giandomenico, the Senior Security Strategist, Researcher, and Cyber Threat Intelligence Lead at Fortinet. Welcome, Tony. So thrilled to have you here today.
Hey, Carrie. Thanks for having me, man. It's awesome. Awesome to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and trends today. And cybersecurity, malware is getting bigger and faster and stronger. What are you doing to keep track of all of this?
Well, something interesting that we do here at Fortinet, and my team is kind of heavily involved in this, is we're really every quarter, we're focused on identifying the actual trends, and we do that through our quarterly threat landscape report. What we're doing is we're looking at the different types of trends specific to application exploits, malware, botnets, and we're trying to find little kind of trends or nuggets that we can pull out, and then we can pass that information on to the security practitioner, and then they can start to focus their security efforts on those specific trends and whatnot. I'll tell you, we found a lot of different sort of trends. We've been doing this for quite a few years now, and this year, we're always continue to find interesting things. One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is the evasion techniques. I mean, I think this is important for organizations to understand that the evasion techniques are getting a lot more advanced. There's a lot more of them out there. I'd say there's probably 60 plus different techniques an adversary can use to be able to circumvent some of your security defenses. And also, a lot of open source tools. You'd be surprised how many open source tools are available out there, say on GitHub, that you can leverage and use to be able to mask the malicious intent of your malware. One specific evasion technique that we see sort of trending a bit is the ability for the malware to be able to go through, once it's on your machine, go through a list of processes and see what AV software may be on your system, find that one and turn it off. Because if they can turn it off, then they can do whatever malicious activity they want and you're never going to get alerted on it. So with that said, it's important to make sure that security controls that you have on your machine, make sure you can identify when they're being turned on and turned off, because that may be indicative that something may be happening anomalous on your machine. And, Carrie, I do see this a lot. Sometimes it kind of alarms me. The end user seems to have enough access to turn on and off the security controls. That should never happen. You shouldn't allow the employees to be able to do that, because if that does happen, obviously they can shut the shields down, but also you're not going to be able to baseline and be able to determine if someone does shut something down, is it nefarious or not. So it could be a false positive. So that's one of the actual things that we're looking at, from an evasion side. But I bet you you're going to ask me a question about what's going on with ransomware, aren't you?
Yes. Let's hear more about that, because, you do these quarterly trends every few months. It's constantly changing. So yes, tell us more about that.
Yeah. It's the ransomware seems to be near and dear to everybody's heart these days. And it's not going away. It's been around for quite some time. It's not going away, but the tactics that the adversaries are using to get that malicious payload down on the environments into those actual networks is kind of changing a little bit. What's happening is, traditionally what you would do as an adversary, it was more of a spray and pray. You would just throw this malware out there, see if it sticks on the wall. Whatever sticks, okay, that's what I do. It's like you throw out the biggest net, see who clicks that link, and then you hope for the best. Well, that worked out in the beginning, but now I think adversaries are finding that if they're a little more targeted, where they can do a little bit more research and identify which organizations have a little bit of a security posture that's not as robust as it needs to be, they'll have a better chance of successfully getting their payload in there. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're being more targeted. And right in the middle of those crosshairs is local and state governments, different cities and municipalities. The city of Baltimore, they got hit. The city of Atlanta last year got hit with the SamSam ransomware. The latest one here in Texas, the Texas Department of Information Resources also got hit. So they're having a lot of success if they spend a little bit more time doing the research to see which organizations might not have the robust security posture needed to defend against these things. I'd also say, because they're being more targeted, the initial, not all the time, but oftentimes, instead of using an email, to be able to do some type of phishing attack to get that initial entry point into the network, they're looking at remote desktop services that may be exposed out there. Remote desktop services, if you have that out there, an organization would use that to allow someone from the outside to be able to connect into the network. Now, there's a lot of other more secure ways that I actually do that, but an easy way to do that is just to throw an RDP server out there. What's happening is these RDP servers aren't as secure as they need to be, and the passwords maybe aren't as strong. So the adversaries are compromising these RDP servers and processes, and that's their initial entry point into the network. So I would say, make sure that if you do have RDP out there, make sure you kind of make sure that it's more secure. If you can find a better solution for it, like maybe a VPN, that might be a better option. And internally in your security posture, if you're not quite up to to the level you need to be able to identify when ransomware may be in your network, make sure you have the proper procedures to be able to restore your backups fairly quickly and restore all that data that had been encrypted from ransomware. So those are some of the things that are going on with ransomware. If we move into something else, I love kind of talking about this because it just continues to get, worse and worse, is this swarm-like activity that we continue to see. What happens is, and, I ask this question because, people will say, hey, Tony, what are the attack trends? Well, I always say, I follow up, well, if you want to know where the attack trends are, follow the technology trends. Because as new technology, new things start to kind of crop up on the internet, you can be sure there's going to be additional attack vectors there. And in this case, earlier on in the year, one of the actual technology trends is, right, it's social media. It's getting this valuable content out to the public so they can read that. And everybody wants to make sure that their content is super interesting, it's refreshed, and it's always out there. It's always available. Content management systems allow you to effectively get that updated information out there. Content management systems like WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, all those are available out there for you, and they're awesome to be able to get that content out there. However, they're always riddled with additional vulnerabilities. Joomla alone had about 6 new vulnerabilities they announced this year. Adversaries definitely know this, and they're taking advantage of it. In Q1 of this year, they were looking at different vulnerabilities that they successfully exploited and were able to then distribute their ransomware or host different types of phishing sites. So that's another thing where they're once they identify that technology trend and they see someone who successfully exploited that vulnerability on that particular technology that starts to trend, everybody else swarms in on it, and they make sure that they have that exploit for that vulnerability within their overall sort of repertoire, their malware or adversary or exploit as a service. So it's interesting stuff that we're kind of seeing out there. Now, I can go on and on, Carrie, with all this stuff, but I'll probably just end it with this one here, which I thought was fairly interesting. The bad guys, they have, in the cybercrime ecosystem, it's a very competitive market. Everybody is vying for your services. In the affiliate program, in the cybercrime ecosystem, these ransomwares as a service, this malware as a service, there's so many different options out there. As a consumer who's looking to rent or buy one of these actual tools, they have to be able to market these things. They have to be able to differentiate themselves. One thing that's very important is it needs to be stable. They need an actual stable system or infrastructure for you to be able to leverage their particular products. Now, because of that, we've actually starting to see this trend. We did some analysis and some research. We found out that a lot of the botnet infrastructure and what have you, where they deliver the malware and they were able to kind of communicate with the malware, they're sharing the same infrastructure, right? They'll look for some of these hosting sites, these bulletproof hosting sites that are safe, they're secure, they know they're not going to be taken down. We'll see multiple malwares, multiple threat actors, or ransomware as a services. They're using this infrastructure. We saw almost up to 60% of some of the malware that we've actually seen were using this same infrastructure.
Hey everyone, we hope you're enjoying this episode of B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. We wanted to let you know about one of the industry's most important events, Ingram Micro's One 2019 event on November 18th through November 21st at the Gaylord Rockies Convention Center. One is your chance to experience what's new and exciting in security, IoT, cloud, and more. Also, you'll be able to network with other businesses, industry experts, Ingram Micro associates, and our vendor partners. Contact your Ingram Micro representative for details on how to register today. All right, let's get back to the show.
I like how you're saying, it's getting worse because there's new technology that's forming. Can you share any insight or data or thoughts on now using smart homes and businesses and what kind of that might be bringing to the future?
We definitely want to continue the innovation of the latest and greatest technology. You know why? Because it just makes your life better, makes my life better. It's going to make our future kind of families much better. It's improving our overall life. And this is great. The problem is, like you mentioned before, so many different new attack vectors get implemented in here. And I think the smart homes, the self-driving vehicles, all that are going to be additional attack vectors. And what you don't realize sometimes is all this stuff ends up being interconnected. One of the things that actually kind of connects it all is going to end up being your phone, because you're going to have apps on your phone that's going to be communicating with your vehicle. It's going to be communicating with all of your smart home devices. It may be even communicating with maybe some of the business management sort of systems that you may be working at. So there's going to be, you might not think that it's interconnected, but it's all going to be like sort of intertwined together. So I think it's going to be important to actually make sure that, especially if you're a remote worker, let's take for an example, the smart home. You're a remote worker, you got your laptop here, you're kind of cooked into your network, you're kind of Wi-Fi kind of locally, and then you're reaching back home or back out to your organization's network. Many times, you're on the same network as all these other smart devices. So I think as a business, making sure that as part of your user awareness training program, you make sure that the employees are familiar and they understand that, hey, you have all these smart devices out there. Make sure that you're updating and you're patching all these particular sort of home smart systems, and also making sure as an organization, you probably want to separate your network that you connect into to your business as opposed to that Wi-Fi network that you have available for all of your home and your smart devices. A lot of the IoT devices, the home routers, have the ability to separate those actual networks. It might make sense to actually do this. And one more thing, I kind of want to allude to this. Maybe this is a an ending sort of question. But all this stuff I talked about, what happens when 5G comes out, right? Mm-hmm. That is just going to just totally change the game, because any device that connects to the internet is going to have the same speeds as you have in your home Wi-Fi, where you're being able to download something with 700 megabytes per second. So it's going to be really interesting in the coming years to see how that actually shapes out when we have speeds that any actual device that has an IP address is going to be able to leverage.
Now, your company does so much with these reports, and you have new cybersecurity playbooks. Why are you putting all of this together?
Yeah, these threat actor playbooks, it's surprising they're really taking off. And to be able to answer that question about the actual playbooks themselves, I got to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about what was being done outside of Fortinet to really lay the groundwork for us to be able to put these playbooks out there. And there's an organization called MITRE, and MITRE is it's a not-for-profit organization that operates multiple federally funded sort of research and development centers. So they come up with these different projects that really are supposed to help the overall community. This one that they put together the last few years called the MITRE Attack Framework or MITRE Attack Knowledge Base. What they did was they looked out there at all the open source avenues, and they grabbed all the security reports from vendors, from security researchers. And what they did is they compiled all of the known tactics, the techniques, and the procedures an adversary would use to complete their cyber mission. They documented it all. This is amazing, and this is really great, for me, because most organizations, they buy, vendor software, they put it in place, and they think that, hey, they're, fairly secure, but they don't really know how effective or ineffective their security posture is to these specific types of attacks, because unless you're really in it every single day as a threat researcher, you don't necessarily know all these things. But now having this stuff freely available, it's out there on the internet, you can look at a specific technique and it'll give you an overview of what it is. It'll talk about what operating systems may be affected. It'll talk about ways that you can be able to detect or protect against it, what logs you need to be able to collect, maybe what high-level technology can help you be able to protect against this stuff. So it's really amazing. It gives us a common language now that we can use that then can be measured. So you take that common framework, and those are the tactics and techniques we are using then to be able to create our threat actor playbooks. And this is exactly what we're doing. My team and others at Fortinet are creating, we're identifying different threat actors that may be trending, different types of campaigns, and we're researching various different campaigns that they've done over the last few years, and we're mapping out all of their different tactics and corresponding techniques back to the MITRE attack framework. So that really gives a good baseline now for an organization to see how effective or ineffective their security posture is to some of those attacks.
Now, there is so much information that you all provide, and I know it can seem overwhelming for some businesses. So how do they maximize the benefits of this concentrated research? What can they use to help their business thrive? Maybe the first few steps they can take.
Yeah, first and foremost, I would go back to, and I'll go back to the conversation around the MITRE attack framework. I think organizations need to start looking at how can they operationalize this MITRE attack framework, right? So going in and just getting themselves familiar with what the adversary is actually doing to complete their cyber mission. Get familiar with that. It can also be leveraged or used as a training tool, right? For folks who are just getting into the industry and they want to understand it a little bit more. Once you understand it, you can start to what I refer to as operationalizing these particular tactics and corresponding techniques. We're seeing a trend here on the organization side where they're looking at these types of tactics and techniques, and they're making sure that their security posture can properly defend against them. Now, this is an ongoing process. It's going to continue to go never ends, right? I mean, security is a process. It's a continuous life cycle. But if you get started, you get a better idea of what your security posture looks like and where your gaps are, where your strengths and where your weaknesses. Now you have that. Now you start looking at our playbooks and you can say, oh, hey, how well do I shore up against this particular threat actor? It looks like they're, targeting me in my specific industry. How well will I fare? Well, you can look at our playbook viewer and you can see the tactics that they're using. And then you can go back to your map and say, okay, well, how do I deal with that? Do I have a gap there, or am I actually pretty strong here? So you can quickly identify where your strengths and weaknesses are. And I'll say all of that ends up being able to answer that one question that always seems to be so difficult for folks that are responsible for securing their own infrastructure. And that is when management kind of comes in and says, hey, I just read in the newspaper this particular threat actor is doing XYZ attack. How well do we fare up against that? Without having this foundational information, it's very hard to get back to your management and give them an actual, an effective and an actual true statement, because it's difficult if you don't have that particular visibility. Now, what I will say, for us to be able to create these threat actor playbooks, it takes time. So one of the things that we're working on is being able to automate this a little bit more. And, one of the things, we have a couple of projects that are going on, but one, we're working with the Cyber Threat Alliance to be able to build these newer, systems that help us automate the actual process of determining what are these kind of tactics and corresponding techniques. Now, it's never going to be totally automated. We're always going to have to probably have some human interaction, but I think it will reduce the amount of time that we do these things. I'll also mention, and it's important for this, a lot of the vendor technologies are also starting to implement this MITRE ATT&CK knowledge base into their products. With our overall security fabric, we're in a very unique position for us because all of our security controls are able to address almost every single attack vector that the adversary has to be able to come into the environment. With that said, we're starting to look at, and we started out with our sandbox technology first, where we're starting to implement these tactics and corresponding techniques that are to MITRE to give the end user a little bit more information and to make it easier for them to identify exactly what's happening in their environment.
So if people want to learn more about what you discussed today, Tony, where is the best place for them to find that information?
Sure. Yeah, we have a lot of different outlets that you can probably get this information from. But what I would do is go to fortiguard.com/playbook, and you'll see our playbook viewer there. You can select on the different, threat actors and see some of the tactics and corresponding techniques. You can also, check the show notes. There should be other detailed information in there as well.
Great. And the last question I have for you, I know you talked about 5G, but where do you see technology going within the next year?
Yeah, I think that's the big one. It's kind of when 5G comes out, I think you're seeing little pockets of it in certain cities. They're kind of experimenting with it now, but I think by 2020, maybe, 2021, it's going to be out there and everybody's going to have access kind of to it. You're going to be walking around anywhere you go, having the same speeds, like I mentioned, as if you're in your home. And I think that is going to really be a game changer. It's almost like when we went from dial-up to actually just having these cable modems, these DSL modems. So many other new services are going to be made available. I don't even know what they all are. But if you think that the volume of threats is bad now and the attack vectors are bad now, it's only going to get worse. I only say that because now every single device, these IoT devices, are going to have the same speeds that everyone else is going to be able to have. And I think, if I remember, Gartner said, I think around 2020, there's going to be 21 billion of these IoT devices out there. So that's a lot of different attack vectors, attack surface that the adversary is going to be able to use to capitalize on whatever cyber mission they're trying to actually be able to complete.
Well, this has been so insightful. Thank you so much, Tony, for your time.
Oh, no problem at all. It was great being here.
If you like this episode or have a question, join the discussion on Twitter at Ingram Tech Soul with the hashtag B2B Tech Talk. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro.
You've been listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, hosted by Carrie Roberts and sponsored by D-Link Technology. B2B Tech Talk is a joint production by Sweetfish Media and Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro production handled by Laura Burton and Christine Fan. To not miss an episode, subscribe today in your favorite podcast platform.